Good evening and welcome to round 12 here in Argentina for the Nations Cup. I am Chris Kavanagh, your host for this series, and we are at Potrero de los Funes in the San Luis province, right in the heart of Argentina. A circuit which has now been disused since 2018, it can now breathe again for the Nations Cup. A series which has actually been quite eventful and quite of a roller coaster, shall we say. And much like always, we will start with Division 2, and the driver standings are as follows. Pato O'Ward leads with 180 points ahead of Felix Rosenqvist in 22nd. Sebastian Buemi close behind on 150. Kevin Magnussen on 146. Leclerc in 5th place on 133. Jamie Whincup and Will Power, the two Aussie compatriots there, on 126 and 115. Felipe Albuquerque on 108 with Robert Wickens. And we've got Christian Lundgaard on 107. Antonio Fiesta-Costa on 104. Raffaele Marcello on 100. And Raymond De Angelis on 83. And the two Italian drivers of Giovinazzi and Fuoco on 76 and 69 were respectively. Felipe Nasr on 68, Stefan Raikkonen on 65, Marcus Ericsson on 54, and we have Kelvin van der Linde, the first of the South African drivers, on 42. Sasha Fenestras, the home heroes, on 38 points, not looking really good there. And then Leonardo Potrero, who's been out of the car for a while, on 36. Rafael Cameron on 34, Nico Verona 31, Rafael Gomez on 29, Sheldon van der Linde on 26, James Hinchcliffe on 18. And then we look further down the order, we have the Indy drivers of Mahavir Raghunathan on 10 points, and Mirai Karthikeyan still on 0. And then we can look at the nation standings. Denmark lead the way by only 3 points on a 253 ahead of Switzerland, and Australia is 12 behind Denmark. It's very close between those three. Bit of a drop away from Sweden and Portugal, both on 212, 41 away. And then Mexico and Canada are both 44 away from Denmark. With many rounds to go still, and many races to go, anything can happen. And we have Monaco on 198, 55 points behind Italy on 181, Brazil 119, Argentina on 71, South Africa on 68, and India with just 10. Before we kick off with proceedings for Division 2 though, there has only been one driver change, and that is that Rafael Camara is now out of the Team Brazil car, but Felipe Nasr now steps back in to pair with Felipe Drugovich. And with that now done and out of the way, we can see what the grids look like. For the sprint, Will Power leads the way in first place with Felipe Nasr next to him in second, Stefan Raikkonen in third for Monaco, Pato O'Ward the championship leader in fourth place, Antonio Fuoco in fifth, Sebastian Buemi in sixth, Roman De Angelis seventh, Antonio Giovinazzi in eighth, Felix Rosenqvist, a championship contender at the minute, or close behind Pato O'Ward, in ninth, Raffaele Marcello in 10th, Jamie Whincup in 11th, Felipe Albuquerque in 12th, Magnussen in 13th, Sheldon van der Linde 14th, Antonio Fiesta-Costa in 15th, Nico Verona in 16th, Arthur Leclerc for Monaco in 17th, Marcus Ericsson in 18th, we've got Rafael Gomez in 19th, Christian Lundgaard in 20th, Kelvin van der Linde in 21st, Felipe Drugovich in 22nd, Robert Wickens in 23rd, Sasha Fenestras in 24th, and as ever, the two India cars, Mahavir Raghunathan and Mirai Karthikeyan at the back. And for the first race of the day for the sprint, it is over to Ryan Ferris.
First race of the day here in Port de la Funes here, and it's Division 2 sprint race. As the lights come on, it's power on pole from Felipe Nasr, and they're away. Great start there from Power. In the background, that's Raikkonen coming around the outside as he goes up into second position. He's come into turn one now, and they're side by side in the background. Power with a brilliant getaway there, and it's still side by side, and Nasr retakes that second position away from Raikkonen. Buemi's in the background, chopping and changing. He's up into fourth with Pato O'Ward in fifth position. Raikkonen trying another move in Nasr, but in the meantime, Power's managed to get a brilliant getaway as Raikkonen goes down the inside, and that looks like Buemi trying to go down the inside as well, but unable to find a way through as they come through that first chicane round the lap. It's a very, very fast undulating circuit as Buemi is now on the back end of Felipe Nasr, and he's going to have a look down the inside. Few movers in the background. That's De Angelis under pressure now and being passed by Raffaele Marcello. Back at the front, it's Will Power with a commanding lead already, 2.6 seconds to Raikkonen. Here's O'Ward trying to find a way through on Buemi, and Buemi's also trying to find a way through on Felipe Nasr. So around through the second chicane, I believe. First time racing here for any of the RML championships, and it's a very interesting circuit. O'Ward making the observation that O'Ward, his championship rival, is definitely going quicker as they come round. Start finish straight to complete the lap. And Fenestraz, one of the home heroes, is already having some issues, so he's going to have to pit to get that sorted. Further on down, here's Jamie Wincup in 10th position. He's got Roman De Angelis just ahead of him. Meanwhile, Marcello going through on Giovinazzi up into 7th position. So he started 10th in this race, so he's up to 7th. But Willpower still extending his advantage, and here is Felix Rosenquist having a look here on De Angelis. De Angelis struggling in this early phase of the race. Further in the background, Boemi did indeed get through on Nazar. We did not see that, but his Wickens also having a bit of an issue as well. Whilst his teammate has been enjoying some of the speed up front, Wickens stuck towards the back in 24th position. But here's Riquelme, 2nd position. Power streaking away out front. But now Boemi's got through on Nazar. What sort of impact can he have in the remainder of this race? Here we are, Pato O'Ward now. He's going to see how quick he can get past Felipe Nazar. As he come across the line once again. Willpower continuing to set fastest lap after fastest lap. But here is O'Ward all over the back of Nazar, and he's going to go through here on Nazar as they come up the hill. And that was fairly easy takings there for the Mexican driver. Didn't waste too much time behind the Brazilian, so now he's going to set off after Boemi, who's a little bit further up the road now. He's had a bit of time to find his rhythm. But now Fuoco also not wasting any time trying to find a way through on the Brazilian, although unable to get through this time round. Nazar saying the car feels good today, although struggling compared to the front runners. Here's Power, a little bit of a lock up there. Down the hill, through the chicane. So they come round in through the final sector. Here's Riquelme, who's being hunted down now by Boemi. The Monegasque driver's been struggling a little bit for pace in his last few races, as his Power still struggling a little bit on this lap. But still, with a comfortable advantage there in the lead, 3.5 seconds. Boemi still continuing to close on Riquelme. Gap is now down to a second between the Monegasque driver and the Swiss driver. Here's Raffaele Marcello finding a way through on Fuoco, but again, a bit like Fuoco earlier on Nazar, thinks better of it. And actually, with Power making a couple of mistakes there, he's lost a couple of attempts for the second to Riquelme as they come through once again. That gap that was 3.5 seconds is now 3.3 seconds as Marcello goes down the inside of Fuoco and takes 6th position. Further back, Rosenqvist still stuck in that 10th position. But this is Marcus Ericsson that we're looking at here in 15th position. And here's Buemi, who's definitely a lot closer now to Riquelme. So they come through to complete yet another lap. So here is De Angelis, and he's trying to go side by side there. For very, very close there between Fuoco and Giovinazzi. He's in a little bit of a Italian sandwich there. Marcello obviously through on Fuoco now, and he's going to set about going after Felipe Nasr. Here's Antonio Felix da Costa, and Team Portugal really struggling this weekend, although saying that, he's just gone through on Robert Wickens, was that? No. It's one of the Danish cars, actually, of Kevin Magnussen. Meanwhile, Pato O'Ward going through here on Buemi. So Buemi caught up onto the back of Riquelme, unable to make a move happen. And O'Ward, no second guessing, not messing about at all, goes straight through into 3rd position, and now he's going to go about chasing after Riquelme, although it definitely seems like Buemi's got the pace here. Albuquerque down the inside of Magnussen retakes that 13th position. So here's O'Ward. So come round to click off another lap. Further on back you have the 2 Team India cars of Raghunathan and Karthikeyan in 24th and 25th position. And Wickens has managed to get through the pair of them. So he is fighting against Calvin van der Linde for 22nd position. But back at the front, 2nd position Riquelme, and he's only just ahead of O'Ward. O'Ward's shaping up for a move now. Unable to go through on the chicane. But side by side now, and O'Ward's going to go down the inside this time. Yes, he does. So through goes O'Ward during the middle part of the circuit. So they come through into the 2nd chicane now. That somewhat allowed Buemi to catch up onto the pair of them, but Riquelme is going to try his best to stay in the slipstream of O'Ward. And as these guys have been squabbling, that 3.3 second lead of power has now gone out to 4.5 seconds. So further on back as we look to Ericsson, who's battling with Magnussen for 14th position. Rosenqvist has been passed by Whincup, and he's now out of the points in 11th position. And this is Calvin van der Linde, who's now under pressure from Wickens, and Wickens tried to go through, but van der Linde shuts the door. Obviously Wickens with the faster car. It's believed that he had a bit of an issue in qualifying, but here is Rosenqvist down the inside of Whincup, retakes that 10th position and retakes that championship point. So O'Ward first intermediate or sector, and he's bringing the gap down once again. It's 4.2 seconds from Power to O'Ward now. And here is Riquelme now, back under pressure from Buemi. And Riquelme is starting to feel a little bit dejected now. His head's starting to drop as he's been swallowed up by O'Ward, and now Buemi's about to do the same thing. But hopefully Buemi has learnt his lesson from before, because he's now got a fast approach in Felipe Nasr, but behind him is also his teammate Marcello. So far through these fast sweeping corners of the final sector. You can see Buemi is closing down the start-finish straight. He's going to try around the outside. And does he go through? Yes, he does. He's got the inside into turn 2. And that is potentially job done, but Riquelme doesn't look to be done quite yet. Buemi's going on the defensive, takes the inside for Riquelme, and Riquelme takes that position back. Meanwhile, in the background, that looks to be Marcello for Nasr, and indeed it is. So, where Buemi thought he had the job done, Riquelme had other ideas. And this is really costing the Swiss driver as O'Ward continues off up the road. He's now taken a second out of Power's advantage. It's now down to 3.5 seconds. Here is Marcello, who's now got his teammate to deal with, although Felipe Nasr is still staying in there. Whether or not Nasr will have a bit of a late race pace, because it seems as though he's doing well to hold on to the back end of Marcello. But now Buemi back into the toe of Riquelme. We'll also see what O'Ward is doing in terms of closing the gap to Power as they come across the start-finish line once again. And it's only a 10th this time, but Buemi's going to try the same thing this time. He's going to go down the inside, and actually this time holds Riquelme up a little bit more, but he's still close enough to mount another challenge. Where is he? I think Buemi's just about done enough this time, and indeed he has. So, Marcello, 5th position, Riquelme just in front of him. Just ahead of him is his teammate Buemi, who's currently on the podium at the moment, and is going to try and do, or see what he can do to close in on O'Ward. Whilst O'Ward continues to try and find a few attempts here and there to catch up to Power, and he's been doing so. It's now down to 3.2 seconds. But further on back, this is the battle for 7th position, Fuoco versus De Angelis, and just behind him is Giovinazzi and Rosenqvist. So through goes De Angelis on Fuoco, and that seemed fairly easy from the Canadian driver. It seems Fuoco, who had strong early race pace, is struggling a bit here and did indeed form a bit of a train. We have had a train from 8th down to 12th. Here's O'Ward, and it's now down to 3 seconds, the gap. Has he got enough laps though? This is Leclerc down in 17th position. Where one driver has been in a podium battle, the other one is, well, nowhere near the points at the moment for Leclerc down in 17th. only the top 10 score in this sprint race. But here is Giovinazzi, and in the background there is Marcello on Riquelme. So Marcello up into 4th position, and Riquelme straight away under pressure from Nasser, who I think is going to have a go coming up into the corner, next corner potentially. No, he had a look, but he wasn't quite close enough this time round, so definitely looks as though it's going to happen though. And what was looking like a good result there for Riquelme is slowly starting to fall away. The team pretty much saying to Power what I said earlier. It seems as though O'Ward makes most of his time up in the first sector on Power. It seems as though O'Ward has got a little bit more power, if you pardon the pun. And that's a very big lunge there from Nasser. That was almost going to be a plane crash there into turn 2, but Nasser thought better of it. And Nasser's coming back at Riquelme now, down the inside. And Nasser starting to show some really strong late race pace here. Obviously decided to dose it out a bit at the start, look after his tyres, and now he's finding himself in 5th position and looking fairly competitive. O'Ward 2.6 seconds now off the back of Power. The team telling him the situation with the championship. In a strong position at the moment, 2nd position, with Rosenqvist only scoring a single point down in 10th. Interestingly, we've completed 10 laps and there's not been a single retirement yet. We had early shenanigans with the single pit stop for Argentina, but apart from that it's all been okay. 2.2 seconds is the gap now between Power and O'Ward. 2 laps to go, and this is the sector where O'Ward tends to make most of his time up. So we will see. Roman De Angelis we're on board with now, and he's managed to gap. There's Riquelme, so Riquelme must have an issue. Potentially. Either that, or he is just struggling that much. As none of the other drivers have passed him yet, so I feel for Riquelme he's taken a little bit too much out of those tyres earlier on in this race. And O'Ward struggling a bit there, finding a gear. It's still 2.2 seconds between himself and Power. Make that 2.3 seconds with that mistake in that sector. So all Power has to do is not put a foot wrong. And here's Rosenqvist down the inside of Giovinazzi. So Rosenqvist up into 9th position. Here's Bohemian for a moment then. I thought he was going slow. But just where we caught him. Bohemi and Marcello running 3rd and 4th, so as the team have said, they're good for the actual Nations Cup constructors. But Bohemi being behind O'Ward, he's going to lose out on another point or two. to the Mexican. From back, that's Wickens going through on Sheldon van der Linde up into 21st position. But here is O'Ward on the final lap. 2.1 seconds to power, and I feel it's a bridge too far for the Mexican driver. But he's going to push all the way to see if power makes any form of mistake. It's under 2 seconds now as they enter the final sector. Power has driven brilliantly in this first sprint race of the day. He got the best getaway of anyone, opening a huge advantage already in the first few corners. As he rounds the last couple of corners, O'Ward's going to be too far away for any sort of challenge. And round the final corner comes Will Power to take Division 2 sprint race win, followed by championship leader Pato O'Ward, and Sebastian Buemi comes through in third. So a great start to the day for the Swiss team. The rest of the field come through. Giovinazzi taking the final point there in 10th position. Wickens, who with his poor qualifying only manages to finish 21st, as we go back to Carthagena. So here's Carthagena. Further on back, 10 seconds behind, is Fenestraz, who's recovered from his early incident. So across the line, and we wait to see confirmation of the results. And here we go. Will Power wins here in the Division 2 sprint race ahead of Pato O'Ward and Sebastian Buemi in third position. Raffaele Marcello finished fourth, with Felipe Nasr managing to come back to fifth position. Roman De Angelis was sixth, and Stefan Ricalmi managed to hang on to that seventh position in the end ahead of Antonio Fuoco. Felix Rosenquist managed to climb up into ninth, with Giovinazzi in 10th and getting the final point there, with Antonio Felix da Costa in 11th, Whincup in 12th, and Albuquerque in 13th. Ericsson was 14th ahead of Villa Gomez in 15th, Kevin Magnussen was 16th, and Arthur Clerk 17th, Lundgaard 18th, Drogovic was 19th, with Verone finishing 20th, Robert Wickens in 21st, with the two Van der Linde brothers in 22nd and 23rd, Ragunathan and Carthagena 24th, 25th, and Fenestraz finishing 26th, with not a single retirement in that race. And with that, it is back to Chris in the studio.
Well, congratulations to Will Power in Australia for a fantastic race win, and Pato O'Ward keeping consistent in second place, making sure he gets a lot of good points ahead of his rivals. Very, very important for him, and a bit worrying for Sebastian Buemi, especially Felix Rosenquist, but then the feature race is yet to come. But now we can look ahead to Division 1 and look at the standings for there. Philip Hanson leads the way for Division 1 on 161, 21 points ahead of Alex Palou. And then Shane Van Gisbergen in third place, 134, tied with Naoki Yamamoto of Japan. And then Rene Rast, who's had some interesting races of late, is now at 129 points, 32 behind Philip Hansen. We have Simon Pagenaud of 128. Scott Dixon, who's been somehow retiring a lot and getting a lot of bad luck, is on 124. Stoffel Vandoorne is 112, on a great run right now. Sandy Stuvik on 111, with Nick De Vries on 105. Joseph Newgarden for America on 99 points, with Kumumi Kobayashi on 97. Paul Aresta for Scotland on 91. And then we have Daniel Yogader for Spain on 74 points, Robin Frines for 73, Carl Larson on 68, along with Sebastian Bourdais on 58, along with Alex Dunn for Ireland, Dries Van Tor 54 points, Andre Lotter of 45, Alfred Evans 44, James Collado 43 points, Jack Aitken 42, Max Hart 34, Natalie Lee Watana Baragol in 25 points, and then Ella Lloyd on 22. And a bit further down the order we have there are many drivers who aren't taking part anymore due to replacements and ban coverages, but Nick Heidfeld is on 7 points. But we can now look at what the nation standings looks like for Division 1 and New Zealand. are in front by 22 points over Japan. A bit of a nice buffer, but anything can still happen. Spain on 214 points, only 44 behind New Zealand. Then we have England on 204, Germany on 192, France 186, Netherlands on 181, Netherlands on 167 points with the United States of America, and then Thailand's on 136, and a bit of a relegation battle with Scotland on 133, Ireland on 92 points, and then Wales with 66. And much like in Division 2, there have been some driver changes, but a few more this time. We have, firstly, at Team Ireland with Aaron McGrath, we have Max Hart has had to serve a round ban, so Martin Donnelly has taken the seat there. And then over in America, we have Carl Larson, who has been vacated out of the seat for Carl Kirkwood to be given a chance. Decision there by Lucy Bassendale. And then finally at Team Spain, but they've got us, Daniel Jugader has to take a race ban, much like Max Hart, and Pepe Marti will be stepping in for this race. Now we can see what the sprint grid looks like, and France are 1-2 for the sprint. Sebastian Bourdais and Sibon Pagenaud taking the front row. Let's see if they can convert a lot of points there for themselves. Naoki Yamamoto for Japan in third, Sandy Stuvik in fourth, Stoffel Van Dorn keeping his good run of form, starting in 5th. René Rast in 6th place, Philip Hansen in 7th, Shane Van Gisbergen starts in 8th, Kabuya Kobayashi in 9th, and Scott Dixon in 10th, Nick De Vries in 11th place, then we have Alex Palou in 12th, Carl Kirkwood in 13th, Elfyn Evans in 14th, Joseph Newgarden in 15th, Robin Franz in 16th, Dries Van Tor 17th, we've got Paul de Resta for Scotland in 18th, with Alex Dunn alongside him in 19th, with James Collado in 20th, Jack Aitken 21st, Ella Lloyd 22nd, Nick Heidfeld for Germany in 23rd, Pepe Marti in 24th, and then Natalie de Winter of Aragon in 25th, with Martin Donnelly in 26th. And now for the Division 1 sprint race, it is back over to Ryan.
Second race of the day is Division 1 sprint race, and it's Bourdais and Pagenaud making it a front row lockout for France as the lights come on and now go out. It's a good start as expected from Bourdais, the pole sitter. Pagenaud in second position with Yamamoto trying to come around the outside but unable to do so. Stuvik also trying to find a way through on Yamamoto, but as a result of that has tripped himself up. The two French drivers at the front are already squabbling for position, and we've got Alex Dunn out already. So Dunn is out with no rear wheels left on his wagon, and he was hit by Heidfeld, I think. Hopefully we may be able to get a replay. But the marshal's very quick to get him out of the way. But back at the front, it's Pagenaud leads from Bourdais and Yamamoto in third position. Heidfeld has been disqualified, although we haven't had a replay yet. But here is Stuvik in fifth position, fighting for his country's position in this league. At the moment there is a relegation battle going on between Thailand and Scotland. As it stands at the moment, it looks as though we are going to see Wales and New Zealand relegated as Hanson is passed by Palou. Hanson, who currently leads this championship with a fairly comfortable margin at the moment to Palou, but if Palou is able to carry on making up positions against Hanson, it won't be so comfortable come the end of the season. That's on board here with Pagenaud, who has taken the lead away from Bourdais. Further on back, here's Kobayashi, now under pressure from Palou. Team Japan currently second in the standings for the Nations Cup. But Alex Palou still all over the back end as Heidfeld has managed to make it back to pit lane. So what can Palou do? He looks as though he's lining up a move, but he's not quite close enough yet, but he's going to continue to close. He's going to try and pull out here down the inside. No, not quite close enough. Rast in the meantime has got through on Stuvik for 5th position. And so has Van Dorn, so Stuvik has dropped down to 6th position. But it's Pagenaud who leads from teammate Bourdais. Here's Martin Donnelly, who is here replacing Max Hart, who's serving a race ban. I'm too old for this, he says, as he is struggling for the pace. So here's Yamamoto now coming under pressure from Stoffel Van Dorn. He was the race winner last time out. Was Stoffel Van Dorn, and he's looking to close the gap and is definitely challenging now on Yamamoto. He's drawing ever closer, but he's not quite close enough for a move here. All while Bourdais able to cruise here in 2nd position. Here's Kobayashi sending it now down the inside of Stuvik. That's 7th position now for the Japanese driver. But here's Yamamoto now under pressure from Van Dorn, and through goes Van Dorn into 3rd position. But Yamamoto very quick to get duck in behind Yamamoto. Sorry, Van Dorn. Out front is Pagenaud. 2.1 seconds is the advantage. But the team, here's Aiken has a bit of a lock-up. I think the 2 French drivers will start to be keeping an eye on what Van Dorn is able to do with his current turn of pace. Bourdais still there, trying to keep Pagenaud honest. Still able to pull away, as here's Dries Van Thor down the inside of Alex Palou now. So up into 9th position, Palou now demoted down into 10th as De Vries comes around the outside of Palou. And that now demotes as he goes through Palou out of the points. And Palou and Hanson now both together and both outside the points here. But he's struggling now. And Dries Van Thor now struggling with a gearbox issue. So after making that move into the points, he's now out of the points now and gets hit by Collado. So Collado, not quite sure what happened there, or what Collado was thinking, because there was definitely a car there. It wasn't as if he came through the corner blind, but now as a result he has lost his front wing. Here we go, on board with the English driver. He comes around the corner. You can see, unless it was just a case of target fixation there for the English driver. Van Dorn was already going out of the race, but I feel there may be a penalty coming the way of Collado, but he's going to have to go back to pit lane for a new front wing. Meanwhile, here's Newgarden down the inside of Dixon. He's going to have to slowly make his way back, and indeed a 2 penalty points, but no time penalty, as he's pretty much given himself a penalty there with the broken front wing. Here's Carl Kirkwood replacing Carl Larson now in the Team America car, and here is Philip Hanson. So as a result of Dries Van Thor retiring, that's allowed Palou back up into 10th position and scoring a more important championship point ahead of Hanson in 11th. Four laps completed, and here's Dixon. And he's looking to find a way back through on Newgarden. Down the inside comes Dixon on the inside of Newgarden, but not quite working there, and that's now allowed Friends and Kirkwood onto the back end. And here comes Kirkwood down the inside of the pair of them. Brilliant opportunistic stuff there from Kirkwood, outfoxing the veteran. And Martin Donnelly, in the meantime, is apparently having an engine blowout, and it's a bit more of a blowout. That's an engine fire there for the Irishman. So, after saying he's too old, retirement too old. And so now he's going to have to go have a little bit of a rest, but he's got a longer race to do later, providing his car can carry on. Still back at the front, it's Pagenaud from Bourdais. Van Dorn still in that third position, but René Rast has climbed up into fourth position. And Yamamoto's fallen down to sixth. Van Gisbergen, as you can see as well, in fifth position. Here's Scott Dixon round the outside now on Kirkwood, but unable to get through. Kirkwood shuts the door. Here's briefly seeing Nick Heidfeld, who is up for disqualification in this race, as we see Kirkwood trying to go on the defensive now from Dixon, but Dixon goes through. And in the meantime, also in the background, Kobayashi, was that going through that I saw? So it was Friends going through. The team feel as though the pace for Bourdais is good. I don't feel threatened at the moment as we see a battle here. I think that's Lee Wataragu going through on DeResta, and DeResta just ahead. There's a big old lock up there for Bourdais. That's not going to help him stay ahead of Van Dorn. Still carries on. Here's Elvin Evans behind the two Scottish drivers. He's also got teammate Lloyd, so it's Scotland and Wales going 2 by 2. At the front, France going 1-2 at the moment. Pagenaud extending his advantage as a result of Bourdais with that big lock-up. 4.1 seconds it is. Pagenaud to Bourdais, and Bourdais now 2.2 seconds ahead of Van Dorn. Past half race distance now. But here's Rast, who's continuing with that turn of pace, as Van Dorn with a big lock up there, and that's actually tripped up Rast. So Rast, who thought he had the opportunity there to go through, has now found Van Gisbergen all over the back of him now. So Van Gisbergen in the tow. He's going to dive down the inside here. Rast thinks otherwise. Shuts the door, and this has really cost Rast now. Where he thought he was going to be going and taking third position away from Van Dorn. But Van Gisbergen closing massively through these twisty corners. And the thing is, for Van Gisbergen and Rast's car very well set up with downforce. As we see in the background, the two Japanese drivers starting to fight. Yamamoto versus Kobayashi. Kobayashi saying he's faster, so he's hoping for some team orders to come his way. But I don't think Kobayashi's going to need the team orders as he goes down the inside of Yamamoto, but Yamamoto tries to hang on. But Kobayashi toughs it out a little bit more, and Yamamoto has no choice but to concede the position. Still out front, Pagenaud from 4.5 seconds now is the advantage. Here's the two Scottish drivers of Aitken and De Resta squabbling for position. There's a lot of squabbling going on between teammates in this race at the moment. All through the field as we see Pagenaud. He's not really put a foot wrong yet in this race, wherever other drivers have. And that's what's allowed him to have this 4.7 second advantage. But here's Bourdais. Still fairly comfortable ahead of Van Dorn. Now obviously Van Dorn with that lock-up through the chicane earlier, which allowed Bourdais to take back what he lost earlier from making a mistake himself. But here's Rast through on Van Gisbergen now, so Rast in 4th position, and he's potentially got the pace to catch up onto Van Dorn, but Van Gisbergen has definitely got the pace in a straight line in comparison to Rast in the German car, and he's closing. Now, is Van Gisbergen going to have a move? Is he close enough for a move here? And the answer is no, not quite, but I feel that it's bubbling up nicely here between these two. Back at the front, 5 seconds now is the advantage for Pagenaud. Two Scotsmen have now finished their squabble, and it looks like Team Wales are going to take over now, with Evans and Lloyd in 19th and 20th. Interesting to point out, for this weekend we have got Pepe Marti in the Team Spain car, taking over from Danny Juncadella following his race ban last time out. But here's Joseph Newgarden finding himself battling against Dixon. And that's a lock up there, I think, for Alex Palou, who's in 10th position still, hanging on there ahead of Hanson. So he's going to take a point back off of Hanson, but he's going to need a few more points than just one if he wants to continue to shrink and decrease the advantage that Hanson has over Palou for the lead of this championship. So 9 laps completed. Now starting lap 10 of this 13 lap sprint race. Pagenaud has been the cleanest drive we've seen all day so far. He's not put a single foot wrong yet, and here's Lee Wataragu having a look down the inside of Frines for 15th position. Here's Stoffel Van Dorn, and also Van Gisbergen has managed to get through on Rast now. So up into 4th position goes the Kiwi, and he's going to go set about Van Dorn for 3rd position. Few laps left. It's somewhat doable, although it's going to be a push. Meanwhile, in the background, further down the pack, as I said, the two Team Wales cars starting to squabble. Lloyd there with a lock-up, which has cost her a little bit of time against Evans. Still at the front, Paginot now extends the advantage to 6.2 seconds to Bourdais. Bourdais is 2.8 seconds ahead of Van Dorn, so he also is looking fairly safe. Here's Dixon now trying to find a way through, and there's Stoffel Van Dorn with a lock up there, so Van Gisbergen is going to be smelling blood now. He's not too far away with a couple of laps left. On board once again, briefly with Ella Lloyd. This is Nick de Vries, who's still holding on to that 9th position ahead of Alex Palou. Here is Aitken with a dive down the inside there on Robin Frines for 16th position. Stoffel Van Dorn still hanging on to that 3rd position, although he's looking to be a little bit more safe now from Van Gisbergen. Van Gisbergen not quite closing there on Van Dorn that time round. Still remains just outside of a second. But here's René Rast, and he's still harassing Van Gisbergen. Van Gisbergen's not been able to dispatch the German driver yet on this second to last lap. So Rast in the slipstream, in the section of the circuit where that German car is at its strongest, and he's going to go side by side. Van Gisbergen shuts the door, applies the throttle a bit earlier, and still hangs on to that 4th position. So here they come round. The laps are running out now for Rast if he wishes to get back through on Van Gisbergen. Although, if Van Gisbergen carries on doing things like that, that's going to allow Rast onto the back of him fairly easily. Looking back now at René Rast, Van Gisbergen still holding on as we have entered the final lap of the race. So across the line comes Van Gisbergen, still ahead of Rast, and Rast, as you can see, able to close through the corners, but is he able to close in the slipstream? And I feel that that Team Germany car isn't quite as fast in a straight line as that Team Kiwi car. As they come onto these tight and twisty corners, this is where the German car comes into its own. Around the sectors, he's closing this time, big time. He's going to try down the inside once again, and he gets the job done. So through back into 4th position goes René Rast ahead of Shane Van Gisbergen, and it looks like Van Gisbergen can't really do anything as Ella Lloyd goes out on the final lap. And it's a loose wheel there for the Welsh driver. So out of the race. Pretty much odds on for relegation this season. Meanwhile, back at the front, Stoffel van Dorn, third position. He's looking fairly comfortable in that position with Bourdais just up ahead as well. And it's a puncture for Dixon. Another failure and another retirement for Dixon. Luckily for Dixon, he wasn't in the championship points. He was just one position out. But still, frustrating times for the Kiwi driver. So, Scott Dixon out of the race, puncture. We're going to go back to the start, and back to the front I mean, as we come round the final corner, or final two corners. Simon Pagenaud is about to come and be sprint race winner for the first race here of Division 1, and a fairly easy one indeed. It was ahead of teammate Bourdais, 7.9 seconds was the gap, and Stoffel van Dorn finishes third position. As we wait for the rest of the field to come through. There's below the final points pair in this race. And the rest of the field comes through. Here's Nick Heidfeld. And he is the last driver across the line. Actually, no, wait, it's James Calado. So all cars across the line now, and we just wait for the confirmation that Simon Pagenaud wins here ahead of teammate Sebastian Bourdais. So a great start to the weekend here, with Stoffel van Dorn in third, Rennie Rast coming back into fourth position ahead of Shane van Gisbergen, Kamui Kobayashi was sixth, Yamamoto with a poor result down in seventh, all things considered, with Sandy Stuvik in eighth, Nick de Vries in ninth, and Alex Palou taking the final point there in 10th, ahead of Joseph Newgarden, Philip Hanson and Liwat Varagu in 13th. Moving down the order, it's Carl Kirkwood in 14th, ahead of Jack Aitken and Paul de Resta 15th, 16th. Robin Fryans managed to get 17th, ahead of Elvin Evans, and Pepe Marti was 19th, ahead of James Calado in 20th. Obviously, James with an issue there. Scott Dixon with the puncture on the last lap, ahead of Ella Lloyd. Martin Donnelly was 23rd. Dries van Thor was 24th with his suspension failure, ahead of Alex Dunn with the accident that was caused by Nick Heidfeld, which was disqualified in that race. So with that, it is now back to Chris.
A pretty dominant display there from France. One could say much needed, considering the amount of retirements they've been having and some ailments that they've had in the last few races in the Nations Cup. So good on them for that result. And again, disappointing for Scott Dixon, but let's see what the feature race brings for him. Hopefully some new fortune. But now we can go to the first feature race of the day from Division 2, and let's see the grid. Raffaele Marcello for Switzerland starts on pole. Felix Rosenqvist for Sweden in second place. Let's see what he could do for a title comeback there. And then Antonio Giovinazzi for Italy in third place. Roman Dangerous for Canada in fourth. Sebastian Buemi, let's see what he could do from there in fifth place. Antonio Fuoco for Italy in sixth. Pato O'Ward, the championship leader, in seventh. He's got his main rivals ahead of him, but let's see if we can get a charge forwards and make it to the end of the race and get some good points at least. Stefan Rakelmi in 8th, Felipe Nasr in 9th, Will Power in 10th place with Jamie Wayne Cup in 11th, Felipe Albuquerque for Portugal in 12th, Kevin Magnussen in 13th, Sheldon van der Linde in 14th, Antonio de Felix da Costa in 15th with Nico Varone in 16th, Arthur Leclerc in 17th, Marcus Ericsson in 18th, and we have Rafael Benegomez in 19th with Lundgaard in 20th, Calvin van der Linde in 21st, Felipe Drogovic in 22nd with Robert Wickens in 23rd, Sasha Filistros for Argentina in 24th, and then the two India cars, Mahavir Raghunathan and Narain Karthikeyan at the back on 25th and 26th. And for the first feature race of the day, over to you, Ryan Ferris.
Division 2 feature time here, and Marcello takes his first ever pole in RMML history. For him, the lights will be coming on as he has Rosenquist next to him. And the lights are off, and away they go. And Marcello with a good start there, with Rosenquist getting a good second getaway. But who's this coming around the outside? It's Giovinazzi up into third position. Rosenquist is going to be wanting to go for a good result here. 30 points behind Pato O'Ward in the championship standings. Here's Buemi going for a move, as well as Rosenquist up the inside into turn 3 there, and takes the lead ahead of Marcello. Giovinazzi holding off ahead of Froco. Marcello going down backwards already, down to third for the Swiss driver. Buemi looking as though he's going to try and get a move done. And who's this? This is Kelvin van der Linde off, and there looks to have been contact there. And out is the South African. So here we go, side by side, and there was contact with one of the, well, it looked to be one of the Canadian cars. I think that is Robert Wickens. Just missed out there. But anyway, he is cradled off, and back at the front, Rosenquist leads from Giovinazzi and Fuoco in third position. So an Italian second and third, and it looks to be Fenestras being done for the penalty there. O'Ward battling down in ninth position, championship leader by 30 points. He's got a fairly comfortable margin there at the moment, but he's under pressure from the two Australian cars of Will Power and Jamie Whincup. Currently second in the Constructors' Championship is Australia. And Buemi being told that O'Ward is suffering and is potentially going long into this stint, and I think also Marcello maybe doing the same, but a bit of a trip up there for Buemi, and that's allowing Riquelme to come around the outside of the Swiss driver, and he's going to be up the inside, but Buemi decides to tough it out round the outside. In the meantime, Felipe Nasr and De Angelis battling in the background, but Riquelme's not done. He's going to try up the inside into 3. And gets the job done. So up into 5th position for Riquelme. Meanwhile, it is Giovinazzi and Marcello has managed to get back through on Fuoco and taking that 3rd position. Here's De Angelis still trying to find a way through on O'Ward. O'Ward up into 8th position now. Back towards the front. Giovinazzi trying to find some pace to try and keep with Rosenquist. Rosenquist extending his advantage now up to 2.4 seconds. And Riquelme with a little bit of a lock-up there in his pursuit for Fuoco ahead. But is that going to allow Buemi to edge just a little bit closer as they come through this final sector? So, still across the line to complete another lap of this 25-lap race. Here's De Angelis, who's fallen behind Whincup. So Whincup's managed to get through on his teammate Power, and now has got through on De Angelis into 9th position, and is already setting about O'Ward for 8th position. And it looks as though Whincup is lining himself up, as in the background that's Felipe Nasr trying to find a way through on Buemi, and it seems as though Team Switzerland struggling a little bit for pace at the moment after a promising qualifying. But Nasr up into 6th position. Whincup was unable to get through on O'Ward that time round, although he's definitely looking as though he has the pace, but Nazar also looking fairly feisty here. As O'Ward tries again, and this time he does get the job done up the inside. Wingcup does go up the inside of O'Ward. And just like that, power is through on De Angelis and is now all over the back of O'Ward. Now, not an ideal situation at the moment, with your championship rival leading this race by 3.5 seconds, and down the inside goes Will Power, and De Angelis is also having a look as well. And there's a whole train of cars starting to appear behind O'Ward, and as it stands at the moment, if he continues to go backwards the way he's going, he's going to find himself pointless. Here is Raffaele Marcello. Third position, he's managed to recover 2 so far, but he's still got Fuoco not too far behind, still well within his slipstream. So on board with Antonio Giovinazzi, who's quite comfortably at the moment in second position, but Rosenqvist getting away as De Angelis now ducks out down the inside of O'Ward, and that's now P10 for the Canadian and demoted to P11 for the Mexican driver. But Rosenqvist continues to extend his advantage, 4.3 seconds. Potentially running with a lighter fuel load, so we may expect to see him come in a little bit earlier. And here is Nico Varone already coming down the inside of O'Ward, and O'Ward just defenceless, it seems, powerless. And the next attacker is Magnussen. This is turning into a real tough day at the office for Pato O'Ward, but someone who seems to be getting it quite easy at the moment is Rosenqvist. And a lot of frustration there as again Magnussen now goes through on O'Ward. And has a lock-up for good measure. Oh, the car's broken on him. The car just completely locked up into the hairpin, and the close Felipe Albuquerque just had nowhere to go, really. I don't think he could have avoided that. So out goes Pato O'Ward. I couldn't tell if that was a car failure or he just clipped the inside barrier there, but complete lock-up there. So, drama in the stakes of the championship. Luckily for O'Ward, he still does have a fairly comfortable cushion to fall back on as Villagomez sends it down the inside of Leclerc. And the stewards have deemed no further action with that incident, and I feel rightly so. Felipe Albuquerque had nowhere to go in that situation. But the situation at the front, Rosenqvist continuing to extend 5 seconds of the advantage to Giovinazzi. Here's Leclerc going for a move. But he's stuck behind Lundgaard in 17th position. The Monegasque team have been a bit of a strange entity this season. Some days they are incredibly competitive as Leclerc goes to dive down the inside of Lundgaard, but just doesn't seem to have the straight line pace. Some days they'll be competitive, some days they'll be pole sitters and race winners, and other days they'll be completely nowhere. But in this other situation we also get it where one of the drivers is at the front and one of them is outside the points. job isn't over yet, says Rosenquist, and I think you just need to speak to Scott Dixon in the other league to tell you that. But continuing to extend the advantage, 6.2 seconds to Giovinazzi. Marcello, I wouldn't say comfortable in third position. He has got Fuoco fairly close to him, keeping him honest. Usually we tend to expect to see the first drivers to pit somewhere between lap 10 and 12 for the first pit stops. Back here's Felipe Nasr, and here's Stefan Recalmi under pressure from Sebastian Buemi, and that was a bit of a failed attempt there by the Swiss driver, and that's cost him quite a bit of time on Recalmi, and also put him into the clutches there of Whincup. Further back here is Verone trying to close in on De Angelis. De Angelis still holding on to Will Power up ahead for that 9th position. But Verone, the top driver of the home heroes, he himself has got a battle to stay ahead of Magnussen. So around comes Whincup, and he is closing in on Buemi, it seems. The team feel they can pit whenever they want. Here's Ericsson now coming around the outside, and a pretty impressive move there from the Swedish driver. So he has gone through on Arthur Leclerc. Meanwhile, his teammates still leading. 7.4 seconds is the advantage. Giovinazzi also 2.2 seconds ahead of Marcello. And Marcello just over a second ahead of Fuoco. So that is one of the closer battles that we have for the top 3. So Fuoco has said he will pit on lap 12. So that will be fairly early compared to some of the other competitors in this race. And in the background there you can see Felipe Nasr is starting to close on Fuoco. 1.7 seconds is the gap between Fuoco and Nasr. Another battle that is looking to be getting closer and closer is Buemi and Whincup. That is 0.8 of a second between them. As we look on, Rosenquist still putting on a masterclass here out front. It seems that the car and driver setup is perfect for him in these conditions. Although the same can't be said for his teammate Ericsson, who is currently outside of the points. So Fuoco still trying to get within that magic 1 second, as here's Villagomez going side by side with Da Costa for position, goes down the inside and takes that 14th spot away from Da Costa, but puts on a bit of a block pass, so that's allowed Da Costa to come under attack from the driver's butt from behind. Here's Wickens in 21st position, and he's had a pretty poor weekend, a weekend to forget really. and a lockup is probably not going to help the situation. Further ahead, here's Drugovic, 19th position. He's having a bit of a lockup as well. So, still, probably expect to see Rosenqvist in the next couple of laps. That would be the next thing to think of, is where will he feed out if he does pit early. Here's Ragunathan towards the rear end of the field. And allegedly being told that he had a podium chance, but I don't know. I don't know what's quite in the water here in Argentina, but I think we could all say that that was never on the cards. But here is Felipe Albuquerque in 13th position. He is all over the back end of Nico Varone for that 12th position. Varone isn't too far himself away from Magnussen, just up ahead. And is Albuquerque going to line up and move down inside? No, not quite close enough this time round. But he is, well, it looked as though he was just going for the move, and indeed he did go for the move there. So Albuquerque through on Varone into 12th position. He's going to set about going after Magnussen just up ahead for that 11th position. Meanwhile, here are the two Indian drivers, Ragunathan and Karthikeyan, propping up the back end of the field. Now, here is Marcello, and here is Nasser, all over the back end now of Fuoco. So, Fuoco's falling off the back end of Marcello, and in doing so, that's put him under pressure from Nasser. Nasser looking as though he is lining up for a move, and indeed he does go through into 4th position. That happens just off of our screens. So, Nasser up into 4th position. Further on back, here is Da Costa under pressure now from Ericsson, and Ericsson brings himself up into 16th position. Here is Giovinazzi, and he is currently 10.7 seconds off of Rosenqvist. As they come across the next timing delta gap to himself and Marcello is about, I think that make that mass isn't quite the strongest, but it's roughly, I think that's 1.6, 1.7 seconds. Here's Kevin Magnussen now being passed by Felipe Albuquerque, so Albuquerque not messing around at all. He's gone through the same place on Varone the last lap, and he's now through on Magnussen. He's now going to set off after D'Angelo, so D'Angelo's a little bit further up the road. So Nasser will be the first driver to pit, and he does so indeed. So 10 laps completed for the Brazilian. He's now going to go 15 laps on this set of tyres. Stefan Rakami has also joined him in the pit lane. Now we are on board with Jamie Whincup, who is now under pressure from Buemi, and Buemi goes through on Whincup. So at some point Whincup did get through on Buemi, but Buemi is back through, and here's Ericsson in the Nordic battle against Lundgaard, and he promotes himself up into 12th position. So this is Giovinazzi. Clear track in front of him. He's got a few seconds over Marcello. And here is Riquelme, who is pitted. And he's making his way past Ragunathan. Further on back, here is Robert Wickens. Still continuing on what has been a miserable weekend for the Canadian. Just been struggling for pace since day one. And it definitely seems as though team manager has potentially taken the wrong setup direction this weekend. Into the pits comes Verone, and here is Nasser going through on Van der Linde. Leclerc has also pitted. But Rosenqvist carries on in the lead. A 12.4 second advantage he has now over Giovinazzi. Make that 12.7 seconds. And the way it's going, he's pretty much going to pit and still find himself within the top 10. On board with Riquelme, we were just there, as he still continues to thread his way through. Rosenqvist is going to box this lap, so that should still bring him out roughly somewhere within the top 10. It is Verone with a lock-up, down in 23rd position. Obviously he has pitted at some point. But Rosenqvist is in, so Rosenqvist in pit lane, Giovinazzi and Marcello carry on. Also into pit lane is Fuoco and Winkup, that's promoted Boemi up into 3rd position. Lundgaard has also pitted, so is most of the field. Here's Albuquerque down the inside, and a little bit of a lock up there, but through he goes on Carthagena. Marcello continuing to look as though he's closing a little bit here and there as Riquelme dives down the inside of Fuoco for position. So 14th position for Riquelme. And Marcello continues to take a tenth here and there out of Giovinazzi. Here's Riquelme under pressure now from Fuoco, and that's nearly contact there from the Italian. How on earth did Fuoco get away with that? I thought for a moment then that was definitely going to be a lost front wing. But somehow he lives to fight on at least another lap. Nasser with a huge lock up there for the Brazilian. That is not going to help his charge and his hopes for the podium today. It's going to leave a nasty flat spot, as in the background you have got Nasser and Riquelme battling in the background. Meanwhile, Magnussen and Ericsson have now pitted, and so has Da Costa, so that's going to promote the likes of Nasser and Riquelme up a few more positions. Here is Verone going through on one of the Team India cars. Giovinazzi continues to lead, but he continues to have in the background closing on him here. But here is his teammate Fuoco down the inside of Riquelme. He retakes that position from Riquelme. And that is 11th position for the time being. Lundgaard under pressure now from Arthur Leclerc, but Lundgaard shuts the door. And again, Leclerc has to press that brake pedal a little harder and think of another way through on the Danish driver. Meanwhile, on board with Felix Rosenqvist, 4th position. He's come out in 11.5 seconds off the lead. Marcello is going to be the first to pit, and indeed he comes in at the same time. I think that was Giovinazzi coming in as well, so it's going to be a battle on the pit lane. And already, such is the dominance so far in this race, Rosenqvist is down the start-finish straight. Now, will he get held up a little bit by Buemi? I'm assuming, based on that team communication, Buemi will be in at the end of this lap. Whincup is in, Power is in, Villagomez is in, and so is Dragovic. And that has somehow promoted Wickens into 3rd. He must be getting a bit of a nosebleed up that being that far up, but he is yet to stop. As there are some passes going on just up ahead. We were on board with Leclerc briefly there. I think that was Lundgaard going into 15th position. And Kevin Magnussen with a bit of understeer there through the middle part of the lap. We wouldn't be wanting to have much more of that happening. And Rosenqvist is already 1.6 seconds off the lead. Buemi still to stop. And indeed, Buemi does come in to stop. So Buemi stops from the lead. And that is normal service resumed for Rosenqvist. And through goes Marcello on Fuoco. So up into 6th position, although seeing that it is going to be Buemi and Wickens promoting Marcello into that 4th position. And Buemi comes out in 8th position, still behind Whincup, although he will have a little bit of a tyre offset compared to the Australian driver. As we look to, I think that's Da Costa further on back on Leclerc. And indeed, it is Da Costa and Leclerc, 16th position. Da Costa down the inside. And through he goes, 1 position away from a point. Here is Giovinazzi in a battle here. For 2nd position, here's Felipe Nasr. Holding on as best he can in front of the Italian, but I feel he's going to be going down the inside. Oh no, he had a look, he had a think about it, and that's actually cost him some time as the car understeered through that corner. All the while, this is allowing Marcello to catch up onto the back of Giovinazzi, along with Fuoco. And here's Will Power with a big lock up there, so 11th place at the moment for Will Power. And he's struggling big time there. You can see the car's just not wanting to hook up through this final sector. And Felipe Nasr still under pressure now from Giovinazzi, and Giovinazzi is soon going to be under pressure from Marcello, so he's going to want to get the job done soon. Drugovic having a look there on Leclerc for 18th position. So it looks as though, and that's another big lock-up for Carthagena. Carthagena almost in the barriers there. Further on back, here is Verone under pressure from Ericsson. Ericsson thought about it, but the car just not having the grunt that time round to get through on the Argentine driver, but still at the front. Here is Felipe Nasr. He's been passed now. Actually, no. Yes, he's been passed now by Giovinazzi. I'm just getting myself confused as all the while. And in the meantime, here is Buemi on Riquelme for 6th position. And down the inside he tries to go, but not quite close enough. Riquelme going a little bit on the defensive there to try and hold on to that position as best as he can, and all the while this is allowing Whincup to catch up onto the back of Buemi. So Buemi's going to want to get the job done first time. He doesn't want any failed attempts, because any failed attempt that happens, Whincup will be right on him. But he's definitely close enough to mount a challenge to the Monegasque driver. And he's in the slipstream down the start-finish straight. He's going to try around the outside into turn 1, which will be the inside for turn 2. And Riquelme shuts the door on Buemi, but it seems like Buemi still managed to stay close enough that he's in the slipstream as they come round. And down the inside comes Buemi, trying to take that 6th position. They're level into the braking, and through goes Buemi, 6th position. And straight away, Whincup all over the back of Riquelme, and he's wasted no time at all. He's gone straight through on the Monegasque driver and through into 7th position. So Whincup definitely with some good pace here in this second stint. Now he is going to chase after Buemi. Here's Ericsson further on back, and there's a big melee going on in the background. This is for 13th position. Actually, sorry, this is 14th position, actually. I was getting mixed up with the wrong Danish car. So Da Costa moves his way into 14th position, and Lundgaard already under pressure from Ericsson, and Ericsson's going to try and have a look down the inside, but he's not quite close enough this time round. He's going to try and set something up here. Again, still unable to go through. So here is 2nd position, Antonio Giovinazzi ahead of Raffaele Marcello. And as the team is saying, Marcello gradually making inroads into the advantage of Giovinazzi's 2nd position. Giovinazzi currently 21 seconds behind Rosenqvist. Rosenqvist nearly with a pit stop in hand. So here's Ericsson. Around the outside he tries to go, which will then be the inside for the next corner, and that's a lock up there for Giovinazzi. Giovinazzi is pushing as hard as he can to try and hold on to the 2nd position. Meanwhile, I think that's Albuquerque who's gone up into 10th position ahead of Will Power. He's going to set about trying to chase after Riquelme now for that 9th position. So here's Ericsson down the inside of Lundgaard this time, and he makes it stick. So that's 1 point for Ericsson. Is Lundgaard with a lock-up just after being passed by Ericsson. This is going to allow Drugovic to have a look, but he's not quite close enough to have a more substantial look this time round. is the battle for second position, and this time Marcello a lot closer, and that's a well held that man from Da Costa, drifting it round there. I thought he was going to be gone, and I think he probably thought he was going to be gone, but he still manages to hold on, but he's still fighting pretty much. I thought that was going to be a done deal there for Ericsson, but all that's managed to do is allow Ericsson a little bit under pressure. He gets forced out there and tries to take the inside, but Da Costa stays very firm in that 14th position, but he's got a train of cars appearing, and Ericsson's going to have another move up down the inside on Da Costa. He makes it stick, but Da Costa leaves the door open. That's almost allowed Lundgaard back through. Still, second position, Giovinazzi ahead of Marcello. This is one of the main battles going on at the moment. Rosenqvist miles up the road with a 21, nearly 22 second advantage. Buemi is gradually closing on Fuoco. Karthikeyan's come to the pit, so I'm assuming technical issue there for the Indian driver. So around the final corners, Giovinazzi still stays another lap in second position ahead of Marcello. Marcello looking as though he's trying to close in big time through the S's at the start of the lap. He's now tucked up the rear end of Giovinazzi's rear wing. As he comes down the hill, Giovinazzi goes to defend, and actually it's not to defend, it's to go round the lapped car that is Karthikeyan, who's just came out of pit lane. And that's really hampered Marcello a bit there. And Marcello not particularly happy with the lap car still staying on the back of him. And down the inside goes Karthikeyan, so out of pit lane, fresh tyres, and Marcello's definitely not going to be happy about that. Unless he can go and do the same thing to Giovinazzi, I think the Italian-Swiss driver will be furious under that visor. So Giovinazzi a little bit more comfortable now in that second position. Now he's got a car between himself and Marcello. It's just whether or not Karthikeyan's going to do anything silly against him. But he's well within the slipstream, and actually here's further on back another Swiss versus Italy battle going on. This time it's between Fuoco and Buemi. So either Fuoco's been running some slower lap times, or Buemi's been running a lot quicker, and this time Buemi trying to look for a move around the outside of Fuoco, but that's not worked. He's going to follow him through the S's now and down the hill, and he's going to hopefully get a good enough slipstream to go down the inside. He's already popped up pretty early there, and has to realise that not enough pace there outside the slipstream. He needed to stay there a little bit longer. Meanwhile, again down the inside, Buemi through on Fuoco. So fourth position for Buemi. That leads Switzerland third and fourth. On what is 21 laps completed of this 25 lap race. And other than your championship leader Pato O'Ward retiring, there has been no real major dramas as such in this race, but still laps left to go for that to happen. Dragovic now looking down the inside of Lundgaard and takes 17th position away from the Danish driver. But here is Giovinazzi, and in the meantime, as I said, Carthagena has gone through on the Italian driver. This has allowed Marcello to catch on to the back of him. He's now well within the slipstream. Down the start-finish straight they go. One more time. Marcello not quite close enough to mount a challenge. And Roman De Angelis is reporting that he's broke his front wing on one of the curbs. So that's terrible news for him. Currently in the points, and he's going to be finding his way outside the points for sure with that front wing change. They are going to put some fresh tyres on, so expect to see him charge through the back end of the field. But here is Rosenqvist, 23, almost 24 seconds ahead of Giovinazzi. He has put up a magnificent performance. A clear masterclass, and this is exactly what he needs to bring himself back into title contention. Here's Raffaele Marcello, third position at the moment, and not too far away from Giovinazzi in second position. Now here is Antonio Felix da Costa now being passed by Robert Wickens for 14th position. And we continue to watch Giovinazzi, who is stuck behind Naren Carthagena, or Carthagena still a little bit up the road, but he's going to have some form of disturbance on the car from Carthagena's car. On board with Marcello. He's a lot closer this time round. He's in the slipstream, but still not close enough to challenge into turns 2. But can he get a good exit? And it looks as though he's having a good exit as he come down the hill and up into the next big corner. He's coming out. He's pulled out of the slipstream. He's going to go down the inside there on Giovinazzi, but Giovinazzi says no and hangs on around the outside of the corner. Brilliant defence there from Giovinazzi, but down the inside anyway comes Marcello, much like what Buemi managed on his teammate. And talking of his teammate, Fuoco is off into the barriers. So what has happened to Fuoco? Carries on, albeit in 22nd position and no longer in a scoring position. It's 2 laps to go as Roman De Angelis has a look down the inside of Sasha Fenestraz. You've got Verone and Fenestraz together, 17th and 18th, also sadly not in a position to score points at the moment. Rosenqvist, who has now started the final lap, nearly 27 seconds is the gap to himself and Marcello. Marcello obviously getting through on Giovinazzi. Buemi trying to see if he can close on Giovinazzi, but I don't think he's going to be close enough come the end of the lap. The team telling Giovinazzi it's all down to him to bring some points home for the team, as his teammate Fuoco will not be doing that today. But into the final sector now comes Felix Rosenqvist with a 27-second advantage, and he has indeed been on another level compared to the rest of the field. Further on back here is Roman De Angelis trying to go down the inside of Fenestraz, but that Canadian car not quite having the pace to do so. But around through the final sector and around the final few corners, as we come up to pit entry, it's then the right, then the left, And around comes Felix Rosenqvist onto the start-finish straight to win here at the Puerto de los Funes race here in Argentina, and that is a very important race win indeed for the Swedish driver. He now cuts the gap to O'Ward. And that will bring, with the race win, 25 points. That will be 5 points closer, plus the fact that he's got a fastest lap, unless someone can do something on this final lap. And Foco out of the race on the final lap it just came up with. So the final drivers coming round. Lundgaard looking to take the final point across the line. Here's Da Costa, who must have had some form of issue somewhere to be that far back and in amongst the Indians. But confirmation there. Felix Rosenqvist wins here in Argentina ahead of Raffaele Marcello and Antonio Giovinazzi in third. Sebastian Buemi came in fourth, with Felipe Nasr in fifth. Jamie Whincup and Will Power coming in sixth and seventh, and Rafael Villagomez in eighth, and Felipe Albuquerque ninth, with Kevin Magnussen in the final top 10 position. Marcus Ericsson came 11th, with Stefan Ricami in 12th and Robert Wickens in 13th. Moving further down the order, Felipe Drugovich finished 14th, with Christian Lundgaard taking the final points paying position, and outside of the points was Arthur Leclerc, Varone, DeAngelis, Van der Linde, Antonio Felix da Costa, Javier Raghunathan and Foco failing to finish on that final lap ahead of Narain Karthikeyan. We now go on to the retirements, and most importantly here, Pato O'Ward with transmission failure, Calvin Van der Linde with his accident that Fenestraz caused, and Fenestraz was indeed disqualified for that. Now after that it is back over to the studio and back to Chris.
It's quite amazing, isn't it, how things can change in a championship. Pato O'Ward being quite comfortable and then has that ailment, and then Felix Rosenqvist just seems to capitalise on that as much as he can. It's pretty impressive. And Sebastian Buemi equally getting a good result in fourth place, so both of them are charging towards Pato O'Ward, and we can actually see now what that does for the driver standings. Pato O'Ward only leads by 4 points. He sits on 190, 4 ahead of Felix Rosenqvist. Sebastian Buemi only 19 behind Pato O'Ward. Kevin Magnussen in 38 points behind, with 152 in fourth place. Will Power now in fifth, 137, with Jamie Whincup in 136. Arthur Leclerc did not have a good weekend. He still sits on 133. Raffaele Marcello on 130 now. Felipe Albuquerque at 115. Robert Wickens 111. Christian Lundgaard 108. Then Antonio Felix da Costa 104. Giovinazzi on 93. And then Roman De Angelis on 88. Felipe Nasr on 85. Stefan Ricami on 73. Antonio Fuoco 72. Marcus Ericsson at 59 points. Calvin Van der Linde 42. Sasha Fenestraz for Argentina didn't have a good showing today, to be fair, for him, and on 38. Rafael Villagomez at 37. Leonardo Forloroni on 36. Rafael Cameron on 34. Nico Verona on 31 points. Sheldon Van der Linde on 26. Hinchcliffe on 18, and then at the bottom we can see there that Felipe Drugovich gets 10 points, with Javier Raghunathan and Narain Karthikeyan still on 0. And regarding the nation standings, Switzerland are 28 points ahead on 301. Australia on 273. Denmark on 260. Then there's a bit of a gap to Sweden on 245. Mexico on 227. Portugal on 219. And then Canada on 217. Monaco now is in 8th place, with Italy right behind them on 201. Brazil 138. Argentina on 71. South Africa on 68. And India with just 10. It is now the final race of the day, the Division 1 feature, and the grid looks like this. New Zealand's Scott Dixon starts on pole with Kamui Kobayashi for Japan beside him in second place. Shane van Gisbergen is right behind his compatriot in third place. Philip Hanson is fourth place. René Rast in fifth. Stoffel van Doorn in sixth. Sandy Stuyvesant for Thailand in seventh. Naoki Yamamoto in 8th, Simon Pagenaud for France in 9th with Sebastien Bourdais in 10th, Nick de Vries in 11th with Alex Palou, who'd be wanting to try and get some more points from there in 12th, Carl Kirkwood in 13th, Elfyn Evans 14th, Joseph Newgarden in 15th, Robin Freins in 16th, Dries van Dort for Belgium in 17th with Paul Aresta in 18th, Alex Dunn for Ireland in 19th, James Collado in 20th, Jack Aitken on 21st, and Ella Lloyd with 22nd. Nick Heidfeld for Germany in 23rd with Pepe Marti in 24th, Nathan Italy went to Navarro in 25th with Martin Donnelly in 26th. And for the final race of the day, back to you, Ryan Ferris.
Final race of the day, and it's Scott Dixon on pole. Will he finally make it to the end of a race, and will he convert this into a race win? We'll find out after 25 laps as we are go here for one last time, and it's a great getaway from Dixon and Shane van Gisbergen, who brings his way up into second position, Kobayashi into third position, and it's a brilliant getaway, but he's already under pressure from his teammate as van Gisbergen's already shaping up for a move down into turn 3, and they're side by side, and it looks as though this is going to be job done as Dixon tried to hang out around the outside, but through goes van Gisbergen into the lead. Further back, Hanson in fourth position. Rast lost out to Yamamoto. Well, Yamamoto's gone back up into fourth position ahead of Hanson. And that's a big old luck up there. And it's Pepe Marti into the back of Jack Aitken by the looks of things. So rather clumsy there by the rookie Spaniard. And he's going to have to go all the way round for a new front wing. But back at the front, it's van Gisbergen under pressure now from Dixon. Dixon really wants to get to the finish here, and he really wants a race win. But potential team orders here as Dixon goes down the inside and retakes the lead. So Scott Dixon not messing about. I was about to say, are the team going to employ any team orders, as Dixon not looking the most likely of the pairing to go for the driver's title, where van Gisbergen's in a better position. I think 31 points off the lead at the moment, or actually 21 points, my apologies. You have the two Japanese drivers, so as it stands at the moment, you've got the Constructors' Championship first and second on the road, with New Zealand and Japan. Now just behind that is René Rast, who is also one of the main title contenders. And Hanson's struggling in these earlier parts, which suggests that he's potentially going to be going longer into this race. And here's Simon Pagenaud down the inside of Stuvik, I believe, for 8th position. Indeed, he does go through into that 8th position. De Vries has gone through on Bourdais. But Pagenaud, another driver to keep an eye on in this race and in the championship. So Dixon trying to put his mark down now and get into a rhythm. He's got 1.1 seconds ahead of his teammate now, as De Vries is continuing to battle here and go up into the inside of Stuvik. So 9th place now for De Vries, and he really has got some early race pace here. On board with Dixon, who continues to gradually eke out a gap, 1.4 seconds to van Gisbergen. Van Gisbergen coming under pressure now from Kobayashi. Kobayashi is now within a second of the New Zealand driver. And Yamamoto also not too far behind. But here is Alex Palou, another one of the title contenders, who's struggled a little bit this weekend, 12th position at the moment. And Dixon with another fastest lap of the race, but that was taken by René Rast in 5th position, so he's also catching up onto the back of Yamamoto. So a little bit of a slipstream fest from 2nd down to 5th position. And here's Pagenaud making another move. He's going up the inside of Hanson now. Into turn 3, and that is job done for the Frenchman. So 7th position, he's going to now set off chasing down Van Dorn. There's a little bit of a lock up there for Albin Evans. Evans in a good place at the moment, showing some good speed as well, but he's got Alex Dunn just behind him as well. But as it stands, on for some points, but further on up the field and towards the front, here is Van Gisbergen and here is Kobayashi. But here is Rast down the inside of Yamamoto. So I said this is all going to be a bit of a slipstream fest between these guys. And Rast with the fastest lap last time round. He's going to hopefully pull his way through the field, whilst Hanson, the championship leader, is struggling a bit down in 9th position. So round they come to complete yet another lap, and they're all slipstreaming off of Van Gisbergen, whilst Dixon continues to extend his advantage. 2.3 seconds it is over Van Gisbergen. But I feel that Van Gisbergen is turning into the cork in the bottle, as we see Kobayashi now very much into the slipstream, but not quite close enough to mount a challenge. Further back here is Stoffel Van Dorn, who also looks as though he's potentially going to be joining this party at the front for 2nd position. And here's Dunn for a moment there, and Collado with a lock up there. I don't know if he was helped there. Now, who is that behind? I think that is Jack Aitken. There's a pass going on, and yeah, Aitken down the inside. And sent it down the inside where the gap was always going to close. So, potential there for a time penalty for the Scottish driver. And Collado forced to the back end of the field. Only Marty, who has had to pit for a new front wing after that incident on the opening lap, is behind, and Collado is still going to try and make his way through onto the Resta. Further on back here is Palou on Hanson, and Hanson's dropped back to 11th position now. Which suggests, well, he hopes, or we hope for him, that it is going to be a case of a heavier fuel load. He's going to go further into this first stint, whereas Dixon comfortably in the lead, but this time being challenged is Van Gisbergen by Kobayashi. Kobayashi sends it down the inside this time, but Van Gisbergen hangs it out, but that's going to put him under pressure even more now. As they come up to turn 3, you've got 2nd, 3rd, 4th, all together. Kobayashi going for the move down the inside, and he goes for it, and through goes Kobayashi on Van Gisbergen. Rast thought he was going to get through, but he's still close enough. He's going to go dive down the inside into the first chicane. So that's 2 positions lost for Van Gisbergen in 2 corners, and he's under pressure now from Yamamoto, and all this has allowed Stoffel Van Dorn onto the back of them. And down the inside comes Yamamoto now into the 2nd chicane. Further on round, and wide is Van Gisbergen, and that's allowing Van Dorn onto the back of him, and Pagenaud's going around the outside. Pagenaud thought he'd had a bit of an opportunistic move. He was going to take the pair of them, but it didn't quite work out. Van Gisbergen is hemorrhaging time now. He's been taken out of his rhythm. And the rest of the field can pretty much smell blood on the Kiwi. So Van Gisbergen had half a lap to settle now, but still under pressure now from Stoffel Van Dorn, but he's able to stay close enough now to Yamamoto, so he's going to get a little bit of slipstream from the Japanese car ahead. But still Van Dorn trying around the outside, very much like Kobayashi did last time round, and still very, very close there. But he's going to still remain under pressure now. He's got two of them on his gearbox. Van Dorn cuts to the inside. Is this going to be easy takings for the Belgian driver? And indeed it is. And this has now forced him out wide. Now Pagenaud's on him, so I assume Pagenaud's going to go for a dive down the inside. No, he thinks better of it. And all this is bringing the Prix and Bordet along. So Pagenaud going for a dive down the inside this time round. And through into 6th position is Simon Pagenaud, and from taking the lead earlier on the opening lap, Van Gisbergen is plummeting. But back at the front further on, here's Rast and Kobayashi battling for 2nd position. Rast has a look, but unable to go through at the chicane. So they come through this very tight, twisty final sector. Dixon, on the other hand, has managed to extend his advantage to 4.7 seconds whilst all these guys have been bickering over positions. But it definitely looks like Rast has got this early race pace. And I feel he's going to pit a little bit earlier, maybe, than Dixon. And with the pace that he's got at the moment, he may be in position to do an undercut, as he has got blistering pace. So Rast around the outside, he's going to go down the inside of of Kobayashi, but unable to do so. He's going to have another go down the hill into turn 3 as he draws side by side on Kobayashi. Is he going to go through, or is Kobayashi going to slam the door? He's through now into 2nd position. Is René Rast, and he's going to chase after Dixon on what is now lap 7 of 25. So we're only a few laps away from the first expected pit stops. There's Bordet now down the inside of Van Gisbergen. Van Gisbergen now down into 9th position. So whilst we were away looking at that, De Vries has already managed to get through as well on Van Gisbergen, and this is turning into a fairly painful affair for the Kiwi. He's now got Stuvik right behind him as well, but I guess one saving grace for Van Gisbergen is once Stuvik's through, there's not anyone near for quite some time. So Stuvik lining up for a pass, and well, Van Gisbergen hasn't even had a chance to lick his wounds. To come up through the tight, twisty, hilly section, uphill onto the flat now, as they come through these very fast right and left-handers into the start-finish straight. And it definitely looks as though Stuvik is lining up for a move. I think we expect to see something into turn 3, although he's getting ever closer. He's not close enough to challenge into this opening chicane, but around he comes, and he's definitely close enough now. So expect a move. Van Gisbergen tries to go on the defensive, but Stuvik goes down the inside. And this time, actually, Van Gisbergen hops onto the position. He says, no, I've had enough of this. And it manages to hold on into the first chicane. So, great bit of defensive driving there from Van Gisbergen. It seems like he's finally woken up. Meanwhile, out at the front, it still seems, even with Rast now in clear air and managing to get a clean lap under his belt. Gap is still extending now. Let's see how it is into this sector as we see Alex Dunn on championship leader Hanson for 12th position. So here's Kobayashi in 3rd position, ahead of teammate Yamamoto, so 3rd and 4th. And a real train of cars here. Bourdais in 8th position. Stuvik still unable to get through on Van Gisbergen, so Van Gisbergen's managed to survive a whole lap without being passed. And hopefully is able to settle in, find a rhythm, and see if he can actually reel anyone back in towards the end of this stint as Dunn goes down round the outside of Hanson, and that becomes the inside for the next corner. They both tough it out, but brilliant stuff there from Dunn. He's managed to go through on the championship leader. Here is De Resta, 24th position. Team Scotland struggling for pace, but not quite as much as Martin Donnelly in the Team Ireland car, as here is Drithan Thor, I think that is, in 15th position, holding on to that final point ahead of Alex Palou. And Palou under pressure now from Nick Heidfeld and the 2 American cars as Heidfeld goes through. So this is Newgarden and Kirkwood. It seems like Palou is definitely struggling. Dixon for once, as Drithan Thor gets it all wrong whilst trying to follow Hanson. Hanson very close to Freins. Who has also managed to get through on Hanson, as obviously we saw at the start of the lap, it was Alex Dunn going through. So Evans and Dunn in for some points this afternoon as it carries on. Hanson being reminded of what the situation is championship-wise, as we are told Rast in 2nd and Pagenaud in 5th is two of the main championship rivals. The other main one is behind him at the moment and not scoring points, and that is the shape or in the form of Alex Palou. Here is Shane Van Gisbergen, who is had a regroup and is now coming back up on Nick de Vries. He still has Stuvik not too far behind though, and there you can see Stuvik very, very close, but he's now close enough that he's going to be getting some degree of a tow from the Dutchman in front. He's just going to hang on to the end of this stint, but here's Elfyn Evans, who's catching up onto the back of these guys, and he's putting on a brilliant race at the moment. And Dixon is going to be pitting from the lead. He was actually losing time to Rast. You see the time, or the gap, was nearly 5 seconds earlier. It's now come to 4.5 seconds, so Team New Zealand, as Drithan Thor has a electrical issue. Now, is he going to manage to make it back to pit lane? As he has to limp back to pit lane, he's holding up Palou, who's been passed by Nick Heidfeld actually. So Heidfeld now promotes himself up into the final point. Pagenaud is also in pit lane, but this is very, very dangerous now for de Vries, and there's contact there in the background, and that's a big crash. And somehow the Marshal managed to catch the car while still in 360. I don't know how that happened, but here we go. Massive cluster going on there, as it looked as though the Welsh car, I think, of I think that was Evans. Maybe. I know it's Ella Lloyd, so Ella Lloyd comes along. She's already planning on going into pit lane, possibly no. So she comes steaming down the inside. Van Thor with the electrical issue, and then Jack Aitken for good measure then T-bones Van Thor. So Van Thor, who thought he was going to get back to pit lane, finds himself in a massive pile-up, and I was worrying that was going to be the issue because that is a very, very high-speed section. And now the issue that Aitken's now got is he was going for pit lane, and because of that incident, he's missed pit entry, and I don't think he's going to have enough fuel to get round to get to pit lane. So this is drama in the opening stint of this final race of the day. Meanwhile, at the front, Rast leads now from Kobayashi. Obviously, Dixon has now pitted. He's come out in 12th position behind Hanson, but he's slotted in ahead of Newgarden. So Rast is covering off Dixon and is going to pit this time round. There's a car just up ahead actually, and that is Rast. So the pair of them coming in there. Rast, Kobayashi are now in. Yamamoto is going to carry on for a lap. I would expect to see Van Gisbergen carry on. So we got confirmation that Rast, Kobayashi in. Who's that? Bourdais and De Vries have also pitted. I think Stuvik has come in as well, so that's promoted Alex Dunn into 4th position, Van Gisbergen up to 3rd, and Yamamoto and Van Dorn 1st and 2nd. So Van Gisbergen, after having a pretty horrific first start to the stint, although they're only going to go a lap extra, but hopefully going to have essentially a 2 or 3 lap tyre delta to his teammate. Who is already up into 6th position, and Rast has come out in 11th, so traffic there for Rast. And not an ideal situation, but the others will have to pit. It's just whether or not Rast will have the same level of pace as he had towards the end of that first stint. But Dixon also the main worry for the Dixon and New Zealand fans is whether or not he will have the pace to carry on, or the car reliability to carry on, as he's of recent yet to finish a race that he's led. In these last few races, as Yamamoto has now pitted from the lead. That's released Stoffel Van Dorn into the lead, so he's going further. Also, Shane Van Gisbergen, as we already knew, has pitted. And Robin Friends and Hanson also join him. So Dixon is now promoted into 3rd position. Alex Palou in 4th, who is still yet to stop. And some side-by-side action here. Kobayashi on Pagenaud, and Kobayashi unable to get through on the Frenchman at the moment, but he's going to have another stab at it as they come up to turn 3, side-by-side. And Pagenaud tried to fight back there, but Kobayashi was already far enough alongside. Carries on in 7th position. Donnelly, further down the back end of the field, has pitted. Here's Van Gisbergen, who's filtered out into 13th position and stuck in traffic, so this is far from ideal situation for Van Gisbergen. He's now behind De Resta and Friends. Here's Alex Dunn, currently in 2nd position. We look to Elvin Evans, who's right on the gearbox now, of Van Gisbergen, so that strategy has not worked at all. Alex Dunn going to pit next time round, and he's got Scott Dixon already close to breathing down his neck. And Van Dorn has pitted from the lead, so Dunn still carrying on. He's not pitted yet, and so Dixon is 2.7 seconds behind. And Rast is, well, as a result of being stuck in the traffic and the pit strategy, has found himself some 9 seconds, or just under 9 seconds behind Dixon, and that gap was obviously a lot less than that before, and this is getting very dicey indeed, as Evans goes up into 11th position. Still stuck behind there is De Resta. Van Gisbergen's been released now into 9th position, and down the inside goes Evans, takes that 10th position away from De Resta. But it seems like in the early part of this stint, Evans has actually got some pace here. Meanwhile, back at the front, it's Alex Dunn leading for the time being, although he has still got to pit. And here's Ella Lloyd with a bit of a lock up there, down in 20th position, obviously caught up in that melee on the pit entry. Jack Aitken miles behind, in fact behind Martin Donnelly and Marty as a result of the incident early on, but here we go. As we say that, Jack Aitken down the inside of Donnelly, who, as he said earlier, is far too old for this. Confirmation. He himself still believing he is too slow to be the reserve driver for Ireland, and I think many will probably say there would be better options out there. So Alex Dunn has now pitted from the lead. That's allowed Dixon to retake the lead. He's now 8.2 seconds ahead of Rast. So a very comfortable margin there. The gap was around 4.3 seconds, I believe, before pitting. Here is Kobayashi, who is now under pressure now from Simon Pagenaud. And Pagenaud is hunting the Japanese driver down. Further on in the background is Stoffel Van Dorn, who is gradually closing up onto the back end of this fight for 3rd position. And just as I say that, the team relaying the message that they need to fight to this and get through on Kobayashi sometime soon, because Van Dorn is gradually making his way to the pair of them. But back at the front, and that gap is gradually coming down, although it's a much bigger ask for Rast to close this gap compared to what he had before he pitted. The strategy not working well for the German driver, who is in this championship fight at the moment. Dixon is still a little bit of an outside chance. I think a lot of his DNFs have basically put the kibosh on a realistic chance of this championship, but anything can happen. Here's Alex Dunn on some fresh tyres, making his way past Elfyn Evans, who had performed the undercut on him, but obviously the tyre delta just a little bit too much. But Evans hasn't finished here. He's still in the slipstream of Dunn, and I think he may try and have another go up into turn 3, but Dunn on the defensive there and not allowing Evans to go through. He's not done yet, still in the slipstream, but you can just see the difference in what having a few newer tyres makes, as just in a couple of corners he's pulled out several car lengths on the Welsh driver. But back at the front here is Pagenaud, and he has got through on Kobayashi, and in the meantime also Van Dorn has got through on Kobayashi whilst we were away. So the threat Pagenaud had from behind from Van Dorn hasn't gone away, it is still there. Gap now coming down a little bit more, 7.2 seconds is the gap between Dixon and Rast, but have we got enough laps? We'll see as we cross the line this time round. There's a move there for Kirkwood on Lloyd, that promotes him up into 19th position. But here is Pagenaud coming under increasing pressure there from Van Dorn. Not quite close enough yet. I don't think we'll be seeing, unless there is quite a big advantage from the Belgian car. You see Pagenaud drifting to the middle of the course. He believes that he needs to start defending now from the Belgian. And Van Dorn's got a good run here. Is he going to have a look down the inside? No, not quite close enough this time round. But I feel like he's going to be mounting a challenge either down the hill this time round. He's definitely getting closer, and he's going to go down the inside here, is he? Side by side down the hill, and there we go, takes the inside away from Pagenaud and up into third. This is great stuff here once again. Van Dorn, who on a few occasions has shown that he's got very good late race pace. But further on at the front, Rast has brought the gap down to 6.6 seconds. Eight laps remaining. Is he going to have enough time? He's consistently able to take time out of Dixon in the lead as they come across the line once again. We'll wait to see what the gap is. It's 6.3 seconds, so he's taken a further 3 tenths out of Dixon in that sector alone. Further on back, Van Dorn fairly comfortable in that third position now. He's taken over a second, or increased over a second, over Pagenaud, and Pagenaud may find himself back under pressure from Kobayashi, but as that is 8 tenths approximately, although it might go up a bit now with a lock up there from Kobayashi. And Yamamoto in the background, now within a second of his teammate. Further on back, here's Sebastian Bourdais, driver who we haven't really spoken about too much in this race, but he's been quietly going about his business. Actually, as we just cut to it, Alex Dunn's just gone through on Shane Van Gisbergen for 8th position, but Van Gisbergen still not going away with this at all. He's still trying to fight back, but it just seems as though where the car seems to be working for his teammate Dixon, it's just not quite working for him today. Further on back, Nick de Vries. Oh, and Rast has broke his front wing, so that takes any chance away from him of winning. And that's going to promote Van Dorn up into 2nd position and Pagenaud into 3rd. So, disaster for Rast, but in these closing stages he's going to have some even fresher tyres. And he's going to have to put on a absolute barnstorming finish, as he needs to make some places back, whilst his championship rival Hanson is in 13th position. And actually falls behind Hanson. In fact, he may even comes out just ahead of his teammate in 14th, who's just been overtaken by Newgarden. So what can Rast do? Obviously, the main objective, at least, is to go ahead of Hanson. And here are the two Japanese drivers who are closing in, actually, on Pagenaud. So, chance here, at the moment, at this pace, at least one of these Japanese drivers, I think, will end up on the podium, but seems Yamamoto's got a little bit more pace. Can he go after Van Dorn with what is 6 laps to go? So here's Hanson, there's Palou, and then just behind Palou, as we see there, that is Rast on brand new tyres. And it's potentially going to be easy pickings for the German driver. You just see he has so much more grip, so much more traction out of the corners compared to those in front of him, and definitely looks as though Rast is going to be making a move. In fact, if he makes a move soon enough, he could get the pair of them before turn 3. And round the outside comes Rast. He's got the traction over Palou. He's going to be on the inside of the corner there, and he's through. And already on the back end of Hanson, I think he's going to get Hanson next already, side by side on Hanson. So up into 12th position. Is it? Yes. Rast through into 12th, and what is turning into damage limitation for Rast. He's already passed his championship rival and championship leader at the moment in Hanson. How many more positions can he make up in the closing stages of this race? As Palou now challenges Hanson down the inside. Hanson really struggling today. 14th, he's only going to be picking up 2 points at the moment. But luckily he has got a fair gap between himself and Heidfeld. Lee Wataragu, and she is out. Transmission failure, I think, by the sounds of things. And indeed, confirmation there, transmission failure for Lee Wataragu. So out of the race, but carrying on towards the front. Dixon now leads 10 seconds ahead of Van Dorn, and barring any failures, I think he'll be crossing all his fingers that nothing is going to happen. As here is Stuvik under pressure now from Rast, and Rast sends it down the inside. 11th position now for the German. He's going to set his sights already on Nick de Vries just ahead. But here is Van Dorn, who is actually closing on Dixon, but he's going to run out of laps at this race at this rate, unless something happens to Dixon, which, well, it's not quite out of the question. It's happened most races so far. I can already hear the particular team manager of New Zealand probably cursing me at the moment. Further on back, this is Newgarden in the hunt for one last championship point as he tries to find a way ahead of Nick Heidfeld, who Heidfeld has looked fairly promising since he's joined the championship mid-season, but whenever he's been in a strong position he's failed to finish in that position, and today struggling for pace, as it looks as though he's potentially not going to be scoring a point. But Rast through on de Vries. And here's Alex Dunn in a very strong 6th position. He's coming under pressure from Bourdais in these final few laps. Rast's next target, as he's now up into 10th position, is Elvin Evans. He's got a few seconds to catch to get to the Welsh driver. And a little bit of a mistake there from Dunn, and that's going to allow Bourdais to continue to catch onto the back end. And already I said there's a few seconds between them, but there's nothing between them now as Rast down the inside of Evans into turn 3. This is brilliant stuff on a comeback drive from the German. Up into 9th position, you can see Van Gisbergen just up ahead of him. How much further can he find his way back up the field? 4 laps remaining, if I've counted that correctly. I definitely think he can get Van Gisbergen, but it's going to be a big ask to try and find enough pace to catch Bourdais in 7th. But if Bourdais and Dunn start squabbling over positions, that could make life a little bit easier for Rast. Further up the field, this is the battle for 3rd position. Pagenaud, Yamamoto and Kobayashi pretty much together. And it's an electrical problem for Van Dorn, so Stoffel Van Dorn in 2nd position is going to have to pit. That's going to promote Pagenaud into 2nd position. And has Van Dorn gone into pit lane? Or did I read that incorrectly? Yes, so Van Dorn into pit lane from 2nd position. That promotes Pagenaud into 2nd, Yamamoto into 3rd. So this battle is starting to heat up a bit more for 2nd position. That's also going to promote Rast into 8th as he continues to catch, and he's already on pretty much on the back end of Van Gisbergen, so I expect to see a move there up into turn 3 most likely from Rast. Here is Van Gisbergen under pressure from Rast. Van Gisbergen not even really attempting to defend there. Rast just breezes on through. But I feel this is going to be the ceiling for Rast. I think it's going to be a bridge too far for him to catch Bourdais now with only a few laps to go. But Yamamoto hasn't given up yet on Pagenaud. He's just over a second now to the Frenchman. Dixon comfortably ahead now. Usually in these sorts of situations, it's been Dixon on the bad end of the stick, getting the bad luck with reliability, but it seems whoever's been chasing him has been dealt the poor cards this time. But this is great points for Team France now. There's Carl Kirkwood with a lock-up there down in 20th position. But this is the penultimate lap. And it seems Pagenaud is pretty safe as Stoffel Van Dorn forces his way up into 3rd position. Very frustrated Van Dorn through on Hanson, so Hanson down to 14th position. 2 points at the moment being scored by the championship leader. As Bourdais goes through on Kobayashi, so 5th position for Bourdais. And Dunn has also gone through on Kobayashi, so Kobayashi struggling for grip now in these final laps. Here is Van Dorn, who's caught up onto the back of Stuvik and Palou, and with a massive tyre advantage, as Rast has also gone through on Kobayashi, so Kobayashi must have a problem. But here is Van Dorn down the inside of Stuvik. That's 12th position for the Belgian driver. He's going to now carry on through these fast sweeping corners, and he's going to be catching hand over fist with those nice fresh tyres. And Kobayashi saying what we thought, there is something wrong with his car. It is Yamamoto still trying to chase down Pagenaud, but I fear it's not going to be enough as Kobayashi continues to go backwards. And through goes Evans on Kobayashi. So Kobayashi, rather frustratingly, he's going to have to pit with only one lap to go as we enter the final lap. Dixon now leads by 14.3 seconds, and he can just pretty much go into cruise control and cruise his way to the finish. Pagenaud seems to have held off Yamamoto, but as long as he doesn't make any form of mistake on this final lap, it looks like second position is his. And a good result for Yamamoto as well. Obviously Team Japan were on for a strong finish, but obviously with that reliability issue in the final stages for Kobayashi, which has taken him out of the points sadly. Evans. Evans is losing drive on the final lap, and that's gut-wrenching stuff for the Welshman. He was on for a brilliant result, but the car has grounded to a halt on the final lap. But in the meantime, through the final corners he comes. Scott Dixon will finally cross the line of a race, finish a race, and not only finish it, goes from pole to the win. Great stuff there for Dixon, and that's definitely a weight lifted off his shoulders. And we have to wait for Pagenaud to come over the line in second position, which he does so, still holding off Yamamoto, who just didn't quite have the pace. But a brilliant finish there for Alex Dunn in fourth position, who stays ahead of Bourdais, and René Rast with a brilliant comeback drive for sixth position. Van Gisbergen in seventh. Van Dorn also brilliant recovery, as that looked like Nick de Vries had part of his front wing missing as he came across the line there. But brilliant stuff there for Van Dorn, coming back to eighth position. Hanson, by the luck of drivers falling by the wayside in those final laps, did manage to come through into 12th position, so not as bad as it could have been. Kobayashi coming across the line in 19th, so what was looking like a very positive day at the office for Team Japan hasn't finished as well as they would have liked. So we're waiting for Aitken to cross the line, and Donnelly's even further behind as he was in camera shot as Dixon came to the finish. So here is Donnelly coming through the final sector, and I think he'll be very, very relieved to see the checkered flag. I think he will be very quick to go back home and pop the slippers on and chill by the fire. But there's confirmation, finally. Scott Dixon wins here at the final race of Porta de la Funes, and Simon Pagenaud second ahead of Yamamoto. Alex Dunn come in with a brilliant fourth position ahead of Sebastian Bourdais in fifth position. Rast with a great comeback drive to sixth ahead of Shem Van Gisbergen, and Van Dorn also recovering to eighth ahead of Nick de Vries in ninth. Alex Palou rounds out the top 10 with Sandy Stuvik in 11th, further on down the field. My apologies. 14th is Nick Heidfeld, Robin Friends in 15th, James Cloud is 16th, 17th for Ella Lloyd, Carl Kirkwood in 18th. Kobayashi managed to come across the line in 19th ahead of Paul de Resta in 20th, with Pepe Marti in 21st. Jack Aitken was 22nd ahead of Martin Donnelly, and on to the retirements. Elvin Evans was classified in 24th position, a lap down, and Lee Wataragu with a transmission failure, and Drithan Thor with an electrical failure in 26th. So a very dramatic end to the race weekend and a big impact on the championship, and we'll hand over to Chris, who will give us the final scores.
He finally does it, ladies and gentlemen. Scott Dixon, after all the ailments of the season, with all the retirements, all the situations of having to go into pits for an engine on fire in Malaysia, and he finally wins a race. That race actually was quite interesting when you look at the picture of the championships. Scott Dixon capitalising with a lot of points, Pagenaud getting a great haul of points this weekend, and Philip Hanson only in 12th. Rather interesting. And René Rast, great recovery drive to get to 6th, as well as Van Dorn in 8th. But let's see how the driver standings looks now. And Philip Hanson on 165, just 4 ahead of Simon Pagenaud for France on 161. Naoki Yamamoto is still in 3rd, only 11 behind Philip Hanson. Scott Dixon now shoots up to 4th place and they're just 13 away on 152. Shane Van Gisbergen's compatriots on 149, and Palou slips to 6th place on 147, but is still not that far away. And then René Rast as well on 147, so it's all to play for. Stoffel Van Dorn is breathing down all these drivers' necks on 128. Sandy Stuvik on 119, Nick De Vries on 114, Kamui Kobayashi on 102 with Joseph Newgarden, Paul Di Resta in 13th on 91 points, and then Sebastian Bourdais in 79, Daniel Yogadere on 74 with Robin Frijns on 74 as well. Alex Dunn now shoots up to 71 with that great drive, and then Carl Larson on 68, Dries Van Toor on 54, Andrew Lotter on 45, Elfyn Evans 44, Collado on 43, Jack Aitken on 42, Max Hart 34, Natalie Wetala-Farrell on 25, and Ella Lloyd in 22 points. And then Mick Schumacher in 27th with 11 points, Nick Heifeld on 9, Tedeschi Makino in 5, and Tenford in 3, Mark Goosens in 1, and then the rest of the drivers all on 0, including Carl Kirkwood, Martin Donnelly, and Pepe Marti. And then the standings for each of the nations: New Zealand with a somewhat comfortable lead now with 301 points, 40 ahead of Japan on 261. France now shoot up to 3rd place in the standings on 240. Spain on 221. Germany now 212 with England on 208 points. Netherlands on 191 with Belgium on 183. USA on now 170 points. Thailand break away from Scotland a little bit on 144 points. So Scotland didn't get anything at this round on 133. Hopefully fortunes change after this round. And then Ireland now on 105 with Wales on 66. So round 12 is now done. The final upgrade window is now open. The managers can now take their winnings and apply it to the car for the final time this season, because the final 3 are up and coming. First of which we head to is Sao Paulo in Brazil. Don't forget that next week we have the penultimate race of the Grand Prix World Series set at Sepang in Malaysia. It's going to be a very dicey affair, that is for certain. Many good teams in the running for that one. But until then, I am Chris Cavaney, your host. Ryan Ferris was your commentator, and this is the Retro Racing Managers League with the Nations Cup signing off.